It has been a long time since there's been this much action. One sad note in all this, of course, is the absence of one name. Our job is to choose whom we think can be the most effective. It's an interesting and exciting race, and all we have to do is vote. So let's do it, and let's make it a big one. We pray that is so. This is Bob Harrington.
Washington moves fast, policies shift overnight, and yet, here in our corner of Vermont, the real impact often comes at the speed of town meetings and Main Street conversations. Politics aren't just about headlines and sound bites. It's about people, communities, and the choices that shape our lives. They say all politics is local, but in a nation this divided, what does that actually mean? We're not here for spin. We're here for clarity, for straight answers, for the kind of talk you'd expect over a cup of coffee at the local diner, not in the halls of Congress. This is Matt Harrington, and this is the Chamber Telecast. Welcome back to the Chamber Telecast, a civic conversation series brought to you by the Southwestern Vermont Chamber with our partners over at Catamount Access Television. Already in mid-2025, immigration isn't a distant debate, it's a daily reality. The Trump administration has spurred a new wave of federal immigration rhetoric, talk of visa rollbacks, expanded deportations, and even rescinding protections for dreamers. Vermont is feeling these reverberations, whether in student visas, ag worker stability, or in lived anxiety of our communities every single day. Yet, Vermont remains a national model of compassion, resilience, and steadfast commitment to human dignity. Today, we're joined by someone who lives and leads at that intersection, former Lieutenant Governor of Vermont and current Executive Director of the Vermont Afghan Alliance, Molly Gray. From her work in international human rights to her leadership in Afghan resettlement, Molly gives us a front row seat to how national policy ripples through our very towns. Molly, welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for having me. And I know we're going to have an important conversation today, and I want to recognize the time that you've given to this topic. There's so much that's happening so quickly. It's hard to keep up, but really appreciate it and have a lot to share.
Okay, so Molly, your first task, we'll start off a little bit light, and we'll get into the breakfast question. But the first speed round for you is, where did we first meet? Where did we first connect? Do you remember that?
I do remember. I think it involved a lot of hops.
Okay.
And it was just before COVID, the beer festival, when
Yes.
I just announced my run for lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
And I recall driving back from Bennington County, driving back up north, and I think the very first cases, COVID cases, were announced in Vermont. And I thought, oh no, the beer festival. It all happened at the beer festival, but I do remember that.
Yeah, I remember closing down. You were a great participant. You were a great supporter of that. It was the Winter Homebrew Festival of 2020, I'm guessing. And I remember turning to my team after the festival was done. The cases had just broken, and I said, "Did we just get our future lieutenant governor the first case of COVID? We might have. I'm not sure." So luckily, the good news is that you didn't, we didn't, and everybody, went on and lived through the pandemic. But always just really appreciated you coming down, being very personable, and connecting with Benningtonians. So thank you for that.
It was my pleasure.
So what we do like to ask on this show as we kick off is, what did you have for breakfast this morning, Molly Gray? And what do you think it says about you?
I love this question, particularly because I have the same thing every single day, to the point where I think my husband's a little worried about our egg budget. I have eggs pretty much every day, unless we're somewhere where we can't get eggs, and then I still try to get eggs. But this morning I had scrambled eggs, side of toast, black coffee. I don't know why, but that's what makes me feel good. I feel like I can't make any decisions about the day, whether it's going to be a good day or a bad day, until I have breakfast. And the days right now are long, they're hard, and I feel like it's what keeps me going. So I'm an egg person.
Okay, you heard it here. Molly Gray's an egg person. A little scrambled? Are you a scrambled?
Scrambled,
Okay.
sometimes fried, mostly scrambled. I've got a 2-year-old now who is big into the eggs. He thinks he likes ketchup on eggs, which I'm like, not so sure about that. But when it's scrambled, there is ketchup involved, unfortunately.
Well, good. Thanks. Thank you for sharing with us. Unfortunately, we do have to dive into some pretty serious topics here. We appreciate starting off on a lighter note. But Molly, I just so respect your leadership through the years as it pertains to Vermont, and then seems like just a real natural fit as you joined Afghan Alliance, and so we got you on this show because along with economic development, along with Department of Labor, along with other guests that we've had on the show, immigration, new American, visa status, deportations, they seem like they are the headlines that are grappling most of our hearts when it comes to what are we as Americans, what have we stood for in the past, where are we going into the future. So as federal rhetoric tightens on student visas, deportations, and border enforcement, how are new Americans, and I think in your case, including Afghans, experiencing the emotional temperature here in Vermont? And I want to be very specific too. I think there's a lot of national news being held about what's going on throughout the country, but I think you can speak specifically to Vermont. Are you seeing fear, hope, uncertainty? What are people sharing with you?
Oftentimes, I think here in Vermont, we think that we're immune from what happens nationally, and sometimes we are. And that's maybe because of our terrific congressional delegation or awesome statewide leadership, or because we're still a pretty rural state. But in this case, it's right here in our backyards, and the immigration policies that we're seeing day in and day out. And right now, if I could share just a little bit of history with the Afghan community. So I work at the Vermont Afghan Alliance. We're a nonprofit that supports Afghans resettling in the state. We started in 2022 as a scrappy driving program. We had a Toyota Corolla helping new arrivals learn to drive. And then in 2023, opened an office, hired Afghan staff. We helped with employment, housing, immigration legal assistance, still driving lessons and other services. But what happened when this administration took office, it's been sort of one blow after another. And just when we think, oh, no, they're done. Another thing couldn't possibly happen. It happens. And I'll speak to the Afghan community's experience, but for the Haitian community in Vermont, for the Venezuelan and Nicaraguan communities in the state, for the farm labor, the migrant community that may be Mexican or Guatemalan, everyone is having a kind of a slightly different experience, partially based on different decisions that have been made to end temporary protected status or humanitarian parole, or because of just blatant targeting of particular groups because they're not white, frankly. I mean, we see racial profiling happening now in communities across the state. So with the Afghan community, it started with the end of the U.S. refugee admission program. So no refugees from Afghanistan or those in hiding in Pakistan allowed to come into the United States. There's been a court order since.
And what time was that, Molly?
Sure. So yeah, I guess, and we're going to jump around a bunch, so please just bear with me. But the very first night, we all probably recall President Trump sitting in the Oval Office at the big desk with the pen, and one executive order is coming across his desk after another, and he's just signing away. And one of the big, proud executive orders signed that night by him was the end of the U.S. refugee admissions program, basically saying, if you're not on a plane, you're not getting into this country as a refugee, even if you have a ticket in hand, even if you are approved to fly in the next several weeks. And there are thousands of Afghans who fled to Pakistan and have been in hiding because if they go back to Afghanistan, they're going to be killed. There's a former deputy minister of justice, prosecutors, judges, interpreters. And so that was the first blow. And that impacted individuals who are here right now. I mean, a staff member here at the Alliance, his father was cleared to fly, had passed every security check, medical check, was cleared to fly. So just devastating. Then several weeks later, we had the end of humanitarian parole for Afghanistan. So no longer were individuals allowed to enter this country under a designation of humanitarian parole. It basically says we're going to allow you into the U.S. You're going to apply for asylum or some other legal pathway. We're going to allow you to stay here while that process happens. So that ended. Then we had just several weeks ago the end of temporary protected status for Afghanistan, which is a determination of whether a country is facing civil unrest, environmental, natural disaster, or some other situation that makes it impossible to return someone to a country, or really a clear violation of human rights. And Afghanistan is now, there's no TPS for Afghanistan, so people can be returned to Afghanistan despite the Taliban still persecuting individuals who have a connection to the US government. I mean, it is one of the most unhealthy, unsafe environments for women in the world. And then most recently, just last Wednesday evening, this administration instituted a travel ban for Afghanistan. So we don't know right now whether women and children of the men who were here, who were told that their wives and kids would come within 1 year, and it's been almost four, will ever be evacuated and ever be permitted to come to this country because of the travel ban. So it's one blow after another, and it's it's hard and it's sad. And these are our neighbors. These are my colleagues. These are the clients we serve. These are people who are filling all sorts of jobs here in Vermont and came here because of a promise of a better life and came here because we made them refugees. This country made them refugees in the context of Afghanistan. So, um,
So
yeah.
speak to that, Molly, and just clarify for me, in my mind, a lot of these people, especially probably the fathers at this point, were helping us during the Afghan and Iraq wars. They were translators, they were guides, they were scouts, whatever they were. So just give us a little bit of a patchwork or a mosaic of, I'm sure, a bunch of people are coming from Afghanistan, and I know some that are doctors and engineers. But were there people that were actually helping us during those 20 years of war as well? Were they supporting American troops, and what's their status at this point?
I'm going to ask you a personal question. I know I'm supposed to be answering, but I'm going to ask. I
Right.
think you're about the same age, late 30s, early 40s
Yeah.
ish, ish. Okay, whatever. So the United States entered Afghanistan right around when I graduated from high school.
Yep.
And my brother served in Iraq, but there was a time when Vermont had more members of the US military serving in Iraq and Afghanistan per capita than any other state in the country. All I know from my adult life is the US has been in Afghanistan. And then if you take that thinking about what we've experienced, what we've known, which has been distant compared to what those in Afghanistan have experienced, and think about that from the perspective of someone who was raised in an environment where the US was not just involved in military operations, but in supporting rule of law projects, in agriculture, in economic security, so helping to start businesses and economic opportunity, supporting schools across the country and girls being able to go to school and access education, the free press, journalism, really projects at every level of society and across the entire country. Plus, I will say not just interpreters with the US military, but also the intelligence community. There was a certain three-letter agency who had a lot of operations in Afghanistan, and they set up their own military, so to speak, to support those operations. So in Vermont today, there are individuals who supported all of those different types of projects, right? Doctors, judges, lawyers, individuals who worked on road construction projects, and then a very large group of people who literally risked their lives in support of protecting the United States, protecting US national security, preventing attacks by the Taliban and the Haqqani network. And those are the ones where, for me, the heartbreak is most significant because of the risk that they took on and because of the promises that were made to them They were Team America, and they said, yes, we're going to do whatever it takes. We're going to support you. We're going to keep you safe, US soldiers. And when the time came and they were told, you have to leave, you were going to get into this convoy, we're going to take you to the airport, we're going to bring you to the United States. And we promise you, again, we promised that we would bring wives and kids within 1 year, and they are still separated. The cruelty, the inhumanity, it's so hard to watch. And then the implications are really, really significant. I'm happy to talk more about like what it means, but practically, it's really hard to resettle in a new place when your heart and your mind may still be half a world away.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I met you as lieutenant governor or candidate for lieutenant governor, but what I've always found fascinating about you, Molly, is just your breadth of work and scope and your ability to have multiple passions. And then obviously we see you very passionate here. Your journey from lieutenant governor to executive director of the Vermont Afghan Alliance is really compelling. And I guess my question is, what inspired the transition? Kind of as you winded down that office, what was that transition like, and how has your background in international human rights informed your current work?
I think public service actually takes a lot of different forms. And we see that in Vermont with a lot of nonprofits and nonprofit leaders stepping up to fill what may be traditionally government roles, right? In food assistance and housing support, in economic development, right? I mean, even economic leaders like yourself, right? Who are helping businesses grow and people find employment. I guess some people see it as a transition, but for me, it's kind of a thread of the work that I've been doing throughout my life, and actually work that gives me a lot of joy. I also ran for lieutenant governor and still strongly want to figure out, I ran for lieutenant governor because, and still strongly want to figure out the demographic challenge that we have. And you and I have talked about this before, that it's really challenging to keep a generation here, right? Like, the kids want to leave, and we get that. I mean, maybe we both experience that, right? And then when they choose to come back, they're like, well, where do I work? Where do I find a job where I can actually afford a home? And then this question of how do we bring a new generation to the state? And I guess the part that I'm really working on right now is the third part, right? Like, how are we welcoming new people who maybe weren't born on a farm in rural Orange County in 8 generations, but have a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge and of professional expertise to share with the state. And I think the state economist most recently said there's no way Vermont's going to birth its way out of its demographic crisis. It's going to happen because we are welcoming new people to Vermont. So I guess I feel that, but I've always felt this, I've had this belief that Vermont can have this kind of outsized role or important perspective that can be leading when it comes to foreign policy and human rights and international relations. I mean, Senator Aiken was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, right? We know Senator Leahy had a huge impact on the appropriations and how the United States government invested in democracies and promoting humanitarian aid globally. And I'm like, maybe we still have that role to play, right? There's something special about Vermont and the way that we think that we are a global state and we have a lot of connection impact. So I guess this was I don't know. In some ways, I guess this healed me. I ran for Congress and had a really devastating loss, and it was really hard to kind of pick myself back up and be like, well, how am I still going to be useful? And this has been a really great opportunity to feel useful, but to really focus on some things that I love. And I am so inspired every day by this community, the staff I get to work with. I mean, I'm here for them. I'm just like, whatever you need, I'm working for you, and I will get out of the way as soon as that makes the most sense. And at some point soon, it will. And then I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do next. But for now, I'm here and really enjoying it, despite it being extremely hard.
we might have some other leadership positions for you to fill in the coming future. And I think that that's always inspiring and hopeful for us. One of the hardest things for me to watch over my 9 years at the chamber is good people lose elections. And I think of even the Bennington Select Board for whatever reason, there was just a lot of great candidates this year, and a lot of them won, and some of them lost. And you're always just kind of coming alongside them in the back, going, don't give up. Find other ways to serve. I mean, we need so many people, good leaders, serving in many capacities. So, Molly, if it hasn't been said yet, thank you for your service, even in the role that you're playing right now, and what a role it is. You talked a little bit about it, but I want to push a little bit further on. There's a lot of federal actions, and I remember just even as we prepped for this show. There's a lot of speed and velocity happening at the national level, and I think never so much as at the immigration level. And so even this morning, it's like, okay, how do we update the questions we're going to ask you? But when you look at the federal actions that are taking place this spring into summer, and they're intensifying around the immigration enforcement, how are these policies affecting Vermont? And in particular, new Vermonters, new Americans, Afghans, immigrants. Anything we left off from the last thing you mentioned, but I just want to open that up.
Yeah. No, uh, I guess to recall, as I said earlier, that we are a state of immigrants, and there are so many different pockets of how should I say that? There's so many new communities that have now taken really terrific steps to welcome refugees and immigrants, right? To use the Afghan community as an example, there's Afghans living in the greater Burlington area, Montpelier, I believe Manchester, definitely Bennington. You have ECDC and the incredible office that's been opened and all that the community there has done. Brattleboro, Hartford, St. Albans. And the same is true for Haitians, Nicaraguans, anybody who's in agriculture, anybody who's in construction in the state knows that many of those jobs, if not most or all, are not filled by local kids over the summer. It's just too hard, right? These are seasonal jobs. Our dairy industry, these positions are filled by highly skilled migrant labor, much of which may not or is not documented. And individuals now are living in complete fear. They don't know if they can go to the grocery store. They don't know if they're going to be picked up outside Home Depot. They don't know if their kids are going to be picked up outside of school or on the way home from school. They know for sure that they can't protest. They can't post anything on social media criticizing this administration. But it's the fear, the uncertainty, and then and that's the kind of like due process concerns. I want to raise those because those are also significant. It's not just the fear of being deported back to Mexico or deported to a country of origin. It's also now questions of, will you be deported to South Sudan? Or I think last night we were reading Guantanamo being used again, which for some individuals, Afghans, the idea of being sent to Guantanamo brings up concerns of many other things that Guantanamo has been used for in the past. So it's the fear of going to a prison someplace far away from your family without any sort of due process, right? No appearance before an immigration judge, no lawyer, no family contact. It's really, really scary. A fear for one's life, frankly. And then, of course, there's the concern, which all business leaders in the state should have, all dairy farmers, all construction workers. I mean, even our state leaders, right? Who is going to build homes? Who is going to make sure that milk gets to schools, and that we have milk in the state, and that we have good food and fresh food to eat? There are so many tack-on impacts to these policies that go far beyond the most important one, which is the inhumanity of it all.
Yeah. You bring up due process, and we've seen towns across Vermont pass resolutions affirming due process rights. But, I guess my question for you, Molly, both, I think from your experience in the state government as well as where you are now, um, what is the actual true protections? We've seen a couple ICE deportations already in Vermont. I mean, just level with us about towns passing those due process things are great, and X, Y, and Z, the chief of police, the National Guard. I mean, who is protecting these new Americans, if they're being protected at all or not at all?
So there's the dark and cynical view, which I want to maybe refrain from sharing because I'm not sure that's helpful. And I think right now, we're all grappling with what can we really do? Do we have any control or power, right? And the focus of this administration, I think, is to exert maximum control and to make people feel a little bit helpless. Um, and what I can say with my former lieutenant governor hat on is that I do believe town resolutions matter. I do believe actions and resolutions by city councils and by the legislature do matter. One, I think that in a time when people don't know, they feel that their control is slipping. They don't know what to do. We need to have leaders who are speaking with a lot of clarity about what is constitutional and unconstitutional, what is right and what is wrong, what is permitted and what is not permitted, because it helps us not normalize things that are not normal, right? It helps us not normalize violations of the Constitution, right? Which is like our founding document that's supposed to keep us safe. So um, these types of resolutions and guidance from state government leaders also clarifies for local law enforcement what their chain of command is, and that the state police in Vermont and local PDs are not being deputized by ICE or by national law enforcement, right? That those are two different, and as they should be, right? They are two different agencies or bodies with two different tracks and two different mandates. And so I think the challenge, though, is exactly what we're starting to see in LA. I mean, we're not seeing it. We're from afar, right? And it's hard to really understand what's happening. But what happens when people feel unsafe because the military's in their backyard? And who do they call? Do they call PD, local PD? Um, so I think that that's always, I hope that this is not this is not going to be the new norm, because I think it's going to get really complicated. And it's going to get really complicated for local law enforcement. But it's so extremely important right now that immigrants and refugees, migrants across Vermont know their rights, that they know that there must be a signed judicial warrant for a search, not to speak, to make sure that there's a lawyer present, to seek an interpreter, all of those rights that are part of an arrest or detention anyways, but it's so, so important right now. And to make sure that documents are carried on one's person at all times. And that we all have to be allies, even those of us who have U.S. citizenship, in knowing those laws and knowing those rights and helping people be informed, and to really be there documenting, supporting, and making sure people know what to do and have a plan if ICE does show up.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And let's shift to, if not more positive, at least more maybe proactive discussions around kind of helping and mobilizing. A lot of young Vermonters are energized in social justice and inclusion work. How can their passions be channeled to make more tangible support? Where can we help the immigrant communities, be that the role of schools, nonprofits, chambers of commerce, government? Where are you seeing, Molly, the greatest need, but also the ways that individuals can support, even churches, synagogues, or other institutions?
The counter narrative is so important right now, right? Every time we hear these super fearful untrue messages coming from the administration and frankly infiltrating our social media and even the mainstream media's coverage, excuse me. Um, it's so important for us to have a counter message, which is we are communities that are safe. There are organizations that provide support, and that can manifest in a whole number of ways. So when I think about young people and what they can do right now, making sure that they are sticking up for getting to know new Americans in their schools and in their community. They know where they're from. They know what their lived experience is, and just being there as an ally and as a friend, and like showing up day in and day out. I think we are so lucky in Vermont. And really, I believe this was an offshoot of or a result of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. There are so many communities now that have a nonprofit with an asylum or refugee focus, right? So there's USCRI up here in northern Vermont and in Rutland, Vermont Afghan Alliance. In Montpelier, there's the Central Vermont Refugee Action Network. I think SHARE is in the Upper Valley. There's Bridges in Rutland. There's ECDC in Southern Vermont. And then there's so many community partners. Vermont is leading the way, in my mind, and I believe this is true if we were interrogated, in refugee resettlement, in rural refugee resettlement. And it's such a testament to the communities and all of the volunteers who have stepped up and said, I'll be a family friend. I'll be someone who can help guide a family and make sure they understand and have a plan in place if ICE shows up. I'm going to help with English lessons. I'm going to help advise on starting a small business. And just these small acts that we can do where we may have knowledge or experience specific to the state to build a bridge to someone who's newly arrived and is here. And really thinking about how to do that in a way that's culturally appropriate, right? It takes a little bit of cultural competency. We can help with that, with the Afghan community, certainly. And then making sure tools and resources are accessible. I think that's a really, really important thing. And Vermont's got some work to do there, but I think day in and day out, we're seeing small steps forward around accessibility.
Snow tires. That's always a big one. I remember we had a rental property and this person came way of Texas, but actually originally from Afghanistan. And they were a professor, and snow tires were just completely like, what are those? What do you mean I'm slipping all over the road in a Vermont December or January? So like you said, cultural things that we have to get people used to. Molly, as we wrap up, and I want to thank you for your time, I want you to picture on your best day, your most sunny day, getting into a hot air balloon, going over Vermont 5-10 years from now, and it's the best day, especially around Afghan Alliance and welcoming new Americans and new Vermonters. What does Vermont look like in 2035 to you if you were to wave a magic wand?
My husband proposed in a hot air balloon, so they have a special place in my heart, and I love them. That's a beautiful question. I envision a multicultural, more diverse Vermont where the promise, and this is going to sound a little America, America, but I do believe that on our best day, when we have really good government, that the promise of the United States, a promise of a nation of immigrants, is still possible. And I want to hold on to that individuals can come here and access an amazing education system, and a place where they can speak their mind and not be persecuted for it, and where women and girls can learn to drive and go to school and have access to all of the resources that they're entitled to. I think that I guess what I've been feeling a lot lately, and I want to continue to share and say to you, but to Vermonters in general, is that no matter what happens in Washington, we have a lot of control here in Vermont, even if it may not feel like it sometimes, in how we act, in what we do, and the ways that we make a difference, even on the most local level. And so in the moments of despair, I just put my head down and turn to what am I going to do today to make things better here, right now? And of course, we can't lose sight of the bigger things, but I think that's really important. And I see that the state has built a lot of foundations over the last couple of years to welcome more refugees, to welcome more immigrants, and that we're going to continue to do that. And we're going to be a much stronger, more resilient state for it.
Great. Great. Thank you, Molly. That's beautiful. If people are inspired, if people want to help, what's the best way to get in touch with Afghan Alliance? Give us a website, give us a Facebook page, Instagram, whatever you guys are doing over there. Where can we get in touch with you?
Absolutely. www.vtafghanalliance.org, vtafghanalliance.org. Our email is info@vtafghanalliance.org. And we love working with community partners. Volunteers take all forms and do all sorts of things with the organization. So if you're interested, don't be shy, just reach out. And I will take a moment to recognize that our federal funding for year 3 of a grant that we have through the federal government is not going to happen. So we are now raising to fill a federal funding gap, and we welcome contributions of any size to continue to employ our Afghan program officers, to keep running our driving program. Even $25 helps with a tank of gas and helps Afghan women learn to drive. So chip in, volunteer, reach out, get involved. There's so much that all of us can do right now when, it feels a little bit helpless and hopeless, but we have to stay focused, and we will.
Great. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, not just for being a visible force of your work, but the moral clarity and obviously the energy you bring every single day. I really appreciate you hopping on today.
Thanks, Matt. Stay in touch.
Will do. We close today on the idea of hospitality. Far beyond policy or procedure, hospitality is a calling. Across time and tradition, Arab, Greek, Pashtun, Jewish, Christian, American communities have affirmed the welcoming the stranger is a sacred act. Imagine if our towns, our neighborhoods, our workplaces truly lived this truth, not as charity, but as a duty, not for optics, but for character. Because building a resilient economy, sustaining a vibrant democracy, it doesn't start with walls or mandates. It begins with welcoming, with hospitality practiced daily, with strangers not feared, but seen as future neighbors. Vermont has long shown the way, but to stay that example, we must live it. Indeed, not just declaration. Let us welcome not based on origin, but on promise. Let us not serve from obligation, but with joy. Thank you for walking through this conversation with us today. It can be tough at times. May we all become better hosts to ideas, people, hope, and to the future we choose to make. Special thanks to our producers, Mike Cutler and Cat TV. Until next time, I'm Matt Harrington, and this is the Chamber Telecast.